So in my last video, I ended up winning just over $500,000 playing poker, which explains why I bought this awesome scooter. $500,000, you gotta get a $500 electric scooter, at least. So today we are gonna go over 2 recent sessions I played on Hustler, and these are the 2 following sessions since that big Friday where I had aces versus kings versus kings. Of course, on that day, I ran super hot. I played, I don't know, kind of mediocre, but the point is, when you run really hot, you should expect to run not so hot at some point in the near future, or at least I think that's how math works. So today we are gonna see whether or not that was the case for myself. Will the heater continue? Will I finally get coolered multiple times and lose all the money back? Stay tuned, let's head to Hustler and go over some hands. All right, I hope you all enjoyed that B-roll from Joey, the editor. He's always putting in that good work. But here we go. In this first hand, Sammy opens to $300. Mars makes it $1,400 on the button, and I've got ace-queen in the big blind. In this kind of situation, I think the best course of action is to either raise or let it go. Mars is an action player, so I decide to raise it up myself, making it $4,000 to go. And then Chin on my direct left makes it $9,000. Given all this action pre-flop, I feel like he's most likely going to have a really strong hand, but it's essentially a min raise, so I'm getting odds to call with a hand like ace-queen. That's what I do, and we go to a flop of queen 8-7 rainbow, giving me top pair, top kicker. So unless he's got an overpair or pocket queens, we should be in good shape. I check it over to him, and he checks it back. I definitely did not expect him to check it back. So when the turn comes to the 3 of clubs, I decide to put in a bet of my own. Don't want to bet too big here though, so I put in $6,000, and Chin makes the call pretty much right away. At this point, I'm not really sure what he's got. I feel like he might be playing pocket jacks this way, maybe king, queen. If he had aces or kings or top set, I don't really see why he wouldn't bet on the flop. So when the river comes to the 8 of clubs, it seems likely I've got the best hand, but the question is whether or not we can get value from worse. And more importantly, would I ever be bluffing in this situation? I think the answer is yes. And in terms of bet sizing, I'm not sure a huge bet makes much sense. So I decided to put in a bet of $10,000, 1/3 the size of the pot. Would also be doing this with some bluffs, perhaps like Jack 10 suited, in hopes of getting ace high to fold. Anyway, he calls right away. As you guys can see, he's rivered 3 of a kind with the old ace 8 suited. So we get a little bit unlucky, but at least he didn't put me all in. That would have been a tough decision, but yeah, we end up losing a big pot right off the bat. Next, this hand goes down where there's a $200 straddle from Chin. Wesley opens to $500. There's a couple of callers, and then Tony Tag makes it $3,000 from the big blind. Once again, plenty of action ahead, and I look down at a playable hand. Ace-king this time. Definitely good enough to raise, so I make it $7,000. And it gets all the way back to Tony, who thinks about his options but decides to just call. Heads up to a flop, which comes a little above average. Ace, king, king, giving me a full house, and of course the nuts unless we're up against pocket aces, I guess. Tony checks it to me, and even though it's awesome to flop a boat, it kind of sucks because what can he possibly call me down with? I don't really know, but I decided to just bet small like I would with all my hands. 4,000 into the middle, and I'm happy to see Tony make the call. So maybe he's got a hand like ace queen or ace jack suited, perhaps. Not really sure. Like I said, I've got almost all the cards accounted for. Turn card is the jack of diamonds. He checks it over to me again, and this time I decide to check it back, much like I would if I had an ace, for example, or some sort of hand that wanted a pot control. But when the river comes to 3 of clubs and Tony checks it to me again, I cannot slow play anymore. It is time to go for all of it. He's only got 9,000 left, which is less than half the size of the pot. So I do announce all in, hoping to get called by an ace. Of course, as you guys can see, my man has got pocket queens, which seems like a somewhat easy fold, but at the same time, he's getting a really good price, and if I am bluffing with a worse hand, he doesn't have to be right too often, so can't blame him too much for calling, but definitely a light call. Of course, I will not be complaining as this helps things get back in the right direction, and we win a $42,000 pot. In the next fun one, Dylan opens to $300, and I've got 8-6 unsuited on the button. This is just a bad hand, and I don't really have an excuse, but I decide to call. I guess I just felt like gambling a little bit with Dylan, who hasn't seen too much action today. Chin makes the call from the small blind, and Henry completes from the third blind as well. So we go 4 ways to a flop, which comes 10-7-6, giving me bottom pair and a gut shot. Action checks all the way to me, and I decide to bet $700. Can already start bluffing with an 8 in my hand, represent like I've got 8-9. And of course, good things can happen as I do have equity with a straight draw and pair. Chin folds, Henry disagrees with everything I just said, and instead check raises to 2,500. I doubt he would do this with just top pair, so unless he's got 2 pair, a set, or a straight, I feel like he's bluffing, and since I've got removal to sets and straights, I decide to get curious and call. I know Henry is capable of bluffing, so it's time to hang on. Turn card is definitely going to help me do just that. It's the 6 of spades, giving me a very disguised 3 of a kind. However, Henry does not seem worried about it because he continues betting, this time $6,500, right around the size of the pot. And I'm still not tripping, honestly. Of course, I've got 3 of a kind, but like I said on the flop, Henry is more than capable of bluffing at the right moments. Unfortunately for him, this is not one of those moments. I make the call, and we go to a river, which is the Jack of clubs. Looks a little bit dicey at first, but upon further inspection, I realize it's just a brick, unless he's got a hand like pocket jacks. But of course, given the pre-flop action, I suspect that'll be the case like 1% of the time, maybe. So when Henry decides to bet $14,000, I am happy to just call. Not really sure if raising makes much sense, even though I do have a very strong hand. I'm not really sure if we can raise for value. Can't really think of a hand that's worse than mine that would call a raise. So again, I just call right away, and we end up winning against Jack 8 of hearts for a river top pair, going for some thin value. It's always tough to play against Henry, but luckily this one goes our way. In this next one, we are playing 25, 50, 100, 200, 4 blinds. Action gets to me in the smallest of the blinds. I've got pocket 6s. I open it up to $700 and face a re-raise from Wesley to $2,300. Action gets back to me, and of course I am going nowhere just yet with a pocket pair, so I make the call. We go heads up out of position to a very good board. 6-5-5, giving me a flopped full house for the second time today. And of course, I know what you're thinking. It's time to just check it over to Wes. But this is a type of board that's going to favor me more than him. So I think leading out once in a blue moon on this kind of texture is okay. Of course, donking out with a full house seems ridiculous, but I'm thinking more about the board than my exact hand. So I put in a bet of $1,600. Also expect this to induce some sort of aggression from Wesley from time to time. And it seems this is one of those times because he raises it on up to $5,600. I, of course, make the call, and we see the Jack of diamonds on the turn. I check it over to him once more, but this time he decides to check it back. And we don't get the best river card. It's the Jack of spades. So now any Jack beats me. But of course, we are beating all other hands, most likely. So the question is, what do I want to do? Should I check it over to him again, or should I bet for value? And I think the answer is to bet. If he had some sort of bluff, he would probably have continued betting on the turn. So once he checks back, I feel like he's most likely got something that could win at showdown. And I think the right bet size here is to go huge because I'm essentially representing a very good hand or nothing at all. He's got 28,000 behind. Pot is 16,000. Good spot for an overbet, I think, both with good stuff and bad stuff. Unfortunately for me, when I announce all in, Wesley folds right away as he's got 9 high. Seems like a pretty standard fold. We do take this one down at least, winning $8,000 in the hand. And that brings us to the last interesting hand of this particular stream, but stay tuned for the following one. Alec opens to 300. Tony Tag calls in the cutoff, and I am on the button with King Jack offsuit. Probably best played as a raise, I believe. Don't really want to call and have someone squeeze behind me, so I make it 1,800 to go. Worth mentioning that folding this hand against a type player like Alec is also okay, I believe. But this time I am in there, 1800 to go. Action gets back to Alec, he folds, but Tony Tag is having none of it. He makes the call yet again. So we go heads up to a flop, in position at least, of Queen 8-3 with 2 diamonds and a heart. Absolutely nothing going on for me, but having re-raised pre-flop, I suspect we can get some folds from better hands. So when he checks, I continue with a bet of $1,200. Small bet, just like I would with all good stuff as well. Tony Tag makes the call, and we see the 5 of spades on the turn. He checks it over to me once more, and I take a look at his stack. He's got around $16,000, and I think we've got a good hand to go for it with. The reason I say that is we have some removal to King Queen and Queen Jack, having a King and a Jack in my hand, and we don't have any diamonds, which means that he could have some sort of flush draws, including ace-high flush draws. Of course, it would be a huge win to get those hands to fold. So I put in a bet of $4,000 this time, but once again, Tony thinks it over and makes the call. So I suspect he's got at least an 8, maybe a queen, but like I said on the flop, we've got a good hand to go for it with. So when the river comes, the 3 of hearts, all the flush draws missed, all the straight draws missed as well, and I've got king high and a dream. If I had king queen, an overpair, maybe even queen jack, I might go for all of it since he doesn't have too much compared to the size of the pot. So doing it with king jack seems like the logical thing to do as well. Of course, I announce all in, and Tony calls right away. As you guys can see, he's rivered 3 of a kind, but I had no way of knowing that. Credit to Tony for hanging on that long with a 3. It definitely pays off in the end, and we lose this one. And with that, we move to day 2. In this first interesting hand, we are once again going to be playing King Jack, except the suited variety. Straddle is on. I raise it up to 600 and get 3 callers. 4 of us go to a flop, which comes ace, 7, deuce with 1 club, 2 spades. Action checks around, and we see another ace on the turn. Will checks from the small blind again, and now Alec puts in some sort of small bet with bottom pair. Makes it $400 to go. I've seen Alec do this before with medium strength hands that I think he's trying to protect with, and I feel like we can pounce on this type of weakness, so I raise it up to $2,000. Unfortunately for me, someone was laying in the weeds behind me with an ace, and that is Will. He makes the call. Action gets back to Alec, and he lets it go. So off to a river. I'm definitely not feeling great about it, but it's an interesting card. It's the ace of spades, completing the flush, but of course putting 3 aces on the board. Will checks it over to me. Pot is $7,000, and now we have a question between just giving up, which I think is more than fair, or going for it. Now, let's think about this. What hands can we get to fold if we go for it? Well, perhaps a flush, since, of course, the board has 3 aces on it, so he loses to any random pair, being a full house. And maybe hands like pocket 2s and pocket 7s that were slow playing on the turn. I feel like all those hands could definitely fold against a bet, but at the same time, he could certainly have an ace. I know it's tough to give someone credit for 4 of a kind, but being that he cold called my raised on the turn, he could certainly have any ace that plays this way, and people do occasionally make quads, so perhaps this is a suicide mission. But we've come this far, and if I'm betting for value with all sorts of stuff, I definitely have to find some bluffs as well. King Jack of clubs seems like perhaps not a great candidate, but good enough to go for it once in a while, and this is going to be one of those times. Now, in terms of sizing, I suspect the right play is probably to go huge since, again, I am representing either a very strong hand or a complete airball. I bet twice the size of the pot for that reason. 15,000 into 7,000. Will, of course, is so happy to see this. He's got 4 of a kind. He Hollywoods for a little bit and eventually announces all in. I, of course, release right away, and we lose a big pot, which didn't necessarily have to be so big, but sometimes bluffs don't work out. You know what's not a bluff, though? Pocket aces. That's what I've got in this next hand, where there's an open to 300. Johnny Vibes makes it 1500. Rob cold calls the 1500 on the button. Then it's on me. Nothing like a bunch of action ahead and then looking down at pocket aces. That happened to me recently, but I can't remember exactly the hand. But I feel like it happened recently. Anyway, I make it 6400 to go. Everyone folds except for Rob on the button with his 6s. He decides to call again, try to flop a set. Heads up to a flop, which comes 10-8-4, 2 hearts and a club. Not the best board for me, but being that there were a bunch of raises pre-flop, I feel like it's probably a good idea to just keep betting. Can't really expect to be up against sets and two pairs very often. So I put in a bet of $7,300, right around half pot. Rob makes the call. He's still beating hands like ace king and ace queen, so can't really blame him. Turn card is the 7 of diamonds. And now the board is getting a little bit dicey, so I feel like the best way to play my exact hand is to check, pot control against hands that have me in bad shape, and of course allow him the opportunity to bluff with perhaps a hand like queen jack suited that he might float the flop with. So all that being said, I check it over to him, but Rob checks it back, which I think is indicative of a 10 or perhaps a hand like 7-6 suited that turns a pair. Maybe pocket nines, all these hands that might win at showdown but don't really benefit from betting the turn. So when the river comes the 8 of clubs, I think the right play here is to put in a value bet with my pocket aces and then maybe fold to a raise. I know it seems kind of absurd, but I feel like that's probably the way to go. Instead, I end up checking, which in the moment I kind of defaulted to, but looking back, I do think that was a mistake. Anyway, Rob checks back with his sixes, and we win a good amount, but perhaps could have been a bit more. A few rounds later, this one comes up where I straddle to 200, Chris Moneymaker raises to 600, and then Alec makes it 2100 on the button. Action gets to Dentist Dave in the third blind, and he cold calls with pocket sixes before I look down at ace-5 suited from the straddle. Now, ace-5 suited is a hand that I think is good to be aggressive with pre-flop to balance out the times I've got aces and kings. In this exact situation, it's a little bit dicey because there's already a raise from early position and then a re-raise from Alec, who generally plays pretty tight. So yeah, a little bit dangerous, but I do think it's still worth going for. I make it $7,000 to go. Moneymaker lets go of his pocket sevens, and now Alex got a decision with king-queen suited on the button. And I think his best options are to call and maybe fold sometimes. He's got a really nice hand to play in position, but he's got other ideas and decides he's had enough of my crap, makes it $22,000 to go. Action gets back to Dentist Dave. He's got a decision now with his sixes. Does he want to gamble and get it all in there or wait for a better spot? I don't blame him for eventually folding. And when the action's back to me, I am not interested in calling with ace high out of position, or at least ace 5, I should say. So I let it go right away. Nice play from Alec. At this point, we are blessed by an Alec Torelli wink at the camera for some reason. Not sure what's up with that. But anyway, let's move on to the next hand where Dentist Dave makes it 500 to go, and I'm next to act with pocket sixes. I decide to re-raise and try to play heads up, make it 1800 to go. That is not what happens though, because Chris Moneymaker, the legend himself, he cold calls with 3 high on the button. These are things only the main event champion can get away with. Action gets back to Dave now. He's got Jack 9. He wants to see a flop. So we go 3 ways to ace 6-5, 2 clubs. The absolute dream. In a re-raised pot, we flop middle set with plenty of draws out there and an ace, which of course either of these guys could have. So when it checks to me, I am not going to be checking. I put in $2,800. Music to my ears. Chris Moneymaker raises to $10,000. Action gets back to Dave. He's got Jack high. He's out of there. I am not out of there. I make the call, of course. Turn card is good. It's the Jack of diamonds, total brick, and it should change nothing. I check it over to him again, and I'm expecting him to either check it back with an ace. Sometimes people raise with top pair in order to get a cheaper showdown, or continue barreling with a hand like 2 pair or some sort of draw that he could be bluffing with. So with that in mind, I suspect he will bet a pretty big amount or check it back, but he does not. Instead, he puts in $10,000 again. I'm not really sure what's up with that. I gotta admit, I did not expect it, and it kind of threw me off a bit. I think at this point, with that sizing, he's most likely got an ace, and he's hoping I just call and he can check back on the river. Like I said, if he had a draw or a really good hand, I suspect he would have bet bigger. Now the question is, do I want to just call again and hope that he bets one more time on the river, or try to go for a check raise and get as many chips in the middle as possible? And this is the whole problem with playing out of position. When you've got good hands, sometimes it's difficult to build a pot. Moneymaker's got around 60 or 70,000 left behind, which is around twice the size of the current pot. So I think check raising is the play. The question is how much. And I feel like if I check raise to like 25,000 or something, even though it does give him a good price, it just looks like my hand is so strong. Whereas if I check raise all in, I might be doing this with some sort of draw myself, and he will be forced to call with an ace, which I certainly think he could have given how this hand's played out. So all that in mind, I end up check raising all in. And of course, now that I can see the cards, that was a huge blunder as he's got 3 high. But yeah, we end up still winning this one against Chris Moneymaker, an absolute legend of the game. Never really thought I'd be playing against this guy, but here I am, misplaying sets against the man himself. And with that, we move to the last fun one of this particular evening. Rob opens to 600, once again in a straddled pot. And now Jabrail kicks it up to 2,500 in late position. Actually gets to be in the small blind, and I've got pocket 10s. Always kind of dicey when you have a hand like 10s. And there's a raise and a re-raise ahead of you. But I am not one to shy away from action. I make it $5,000 to go, trying to get everyone out except for Jabrail and then see what he wants to do. And what he wants to do is go all in for his $17,000. Of course, folding pocket 10s at this point seems more than reasonable, but at the same time, we could be flipping against some overcards, and who knows, he might have a smaller pocket pair. Not very often, but the thing is, Jabrail is a nice guy, someone I enjoy playing with, and more importantly, someone that I want to give action to when he visits from Miami. So if he's got me in bad shape, so be it. I am in there with the pocket 10s, and like I said, could be ahead sometimes. This is not one of those times. My man has got himself some pocket kings. That's going to be pretty good, especially when he's got my exact suits covered, so I can't even make a flush. We decided to run it twice, and sadly for me, well, I guess not very sadly, but maybe fairly is the better word, I do not end up hitting a set on either board, and we lose this one to Jabrail. Nice hand, sir. Take that money back to Miami with you. I'll see you next time. Anyway, that was the last fun hand of this particular evening. I was kind of card dead, but stay tuned for the outro where I go over some things that happened post-stream. As always, hope you all enjoyed the hands. Right, so as you guys saw, I didn't play particularly well, first and foremost. I didn't run very well either, I think. That's probably worth mentioning. And in the end, across both streams, I ended up losing like $50,000, around the same amount on both streams. However, on the second day, you guys didn't see this, but I actually ended up making a comeback post-stream, playing shorthanded, and also some heads up against Rob, aka Poker Guru. And that ended up going well for me. In fact, I won $50,000 on the second day. So yeah, I guess overall kind of breaking even, but I did end up winning around 20,000 bottom line across both of those sessions that you guys just saw. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the hands. I'm gonna go get some coffee on my sweet new ride, and that's it for today. Until next time, good luck at the tables. Thanks for the support. Peace.